So yes, I'm David. I head up the open source program office here at BrowserStack. I am the chair of the W3C browser testing and tools working group. So that's where the WebDriver specification lives within the W3C and the WebDriver BiDi specification. And so I chair that. And chairing a working group means you are effectively the main administrator for it, and you kind of help organize meetings and stuff like that. So it's a lot of extra work like that, but it's kind of cool. Within BrowserStack, I manage a group of engineers who look after supporting Selenium projects, working on Nightwatch.js, and then also supporting internal teams, like if you use Automate, making sure that they are fully supported. And so today, my plan is to walk you through Nightwatch.js, which is kind of our main project within the open source program office. And we'll go through it. I'm going to like talk about different things. I'm going to do a few demos. And if you have questions, just put them in the Q&A. I believe there should be a Q&A section, sorry, in the chat. And from there, I will just put them in the chat, and I will kind of get to them near the end, because there's bound to be things that I've probably forgotten as I go through, but hopefully we can get through, and by the end of it you should hopefully understand what Nightwatch.js is, and why it's important for kind of the testing ecosystem. Cool. Right, so let's get started. This is my agenda. So I'll talk you through what it is, getting started with the project, writing some tests, running some tests. I forgot to put it in there, debugging and reporting, but we'll put that at the end. And hopefully there'll be some really cool demos. And like, I'm praying to the demo gods that things are going to work. They were working before I came in here, but knowing my luck, they will have stopped working. But we'll wait and see. So what is Nightwatch.js? It's a project that was created by Andre Rousseau about, I've got to do my maths, I think about 9 years ago. It's built in JavaScript. It is a testing framework in the sense of it's a batteries included testing framework. And so by batteries included, it means that for the most part, all you need to do is an npm install, and you should be able to start running your tests as quickly as possible. It supports all the things, and by all the things, I mean all the testing things in JavaScript. So if you want to do kind of different types of testing, not just end-to-end testing through Selenium, you should be able to do it with Nightwatch.js. And it gives you the ability to have a single CLI command that is easy to kind of start using straight away. If people could just make sure they're on mute, it will hopefully help others not feel distracted. Cool. Oh, sorry. So we got that. So how do you get started with Nightwatch.js? The team has, at its core, tried to make sure that developer experience when working with Nightwatch is first and foremost. That if you want to do something, the complexity should be put onto Nightwatch, not onto the end user. So if you have a project and you want to start using Nightwatch within it, it's a simple case of doing the following command: npm init nightwatch. And due to a bug, well, I consider a bug in npm, npm folks will probably tell you it's not a bug, it's a feature. You have to say at latest. because NPM is very heavy on its caching of things. So if it finds an older version, it won't check that the older version is out of date. It will just kind of use the older version. So we always say use NPM at latest. Now, when I was talking earlier, Arjun, that's not a dumb question, but I will explain in a minute why. One of the things when I talked about like Nightwatch focusing in on all the testing is that it has the ability to kind of test on pretty much anything, on all devices, everything that we go through. So if you want to test on your web applications, so web applications could be the website itself, API testing, accessibility, and so on. But it also has the ability to run those tests on mobile devices. And so that's the easiest way, and most people think that's how you want your browser, how do you get started with mobile? Well, it's the same command, truthfully. And the key focus is that when we run this command, and I'll do this in a second, is that you can see how the questions that it asks you, so that we can just kind of craft your environment into a nice space that you can kind of just go and get started in. So, as I said, we'll be doing demos. I'm going to come out of this, and now I need to find my terminal, which obviously has moved to the other screen, so we'll go back. And so I'll just create a new terminal so that it starts from scratch. And we'll put it in the test pad, and I create, I think yes, I did. CD champions. And so we'll make so now one of the key things here is it's an empty directory. It doesn't need to be an empty directory, but in this case, I'm hoping you can still see my screen. It's an empty directory. And so, as I said, you just do npm init nightwatch latest. People get the latest, and then it'll start asking you some really important questions for how you want to test it. Now, your average tester is only automated tester, developer, probably going to care about end-to-end testing, but I'll explain the others in a minute. And so we're going to do end-to-end testing. Just for this one, I'll go through it again in a moment just to show you mobile. And you can choose if you want it in JavaScript or TypeScript, and we have different types of runners. I'm not a big fan of Cucumber, so I normally just do everything with the defaults, but you can do it with Cucumber or Mocha, and we try kind of balance everything out. And if you wanted TypeScript, it also sets up your tsconfig file for you, so that like if there's specific types, it tells you you can then go into the tsconfig and add your types of that are required for your tests that you might create into everything, and then start using it. So in this case, I'll just do the defaults. You can select your browser. I worked at Mozilla. I'm a huge fan of Firefox, and I'm a big advocate for kind of more browsers in the market. So I want to make sure that things don't work on all browsers, except Edge, because that's just Chrome in a different way. Where we're going to put our tests. In this case, it's just going to be a directory called test. If you need to care about your base URL, this goes into the config for later, so we'll just leave it at that. In this case, for simplicity, I'm just going to leave it to run on localhost. We collect some metrics. Those metrics are fully anonymized, and you can see all the code that goes into that if you're very concerned, but you can also turn it off. And I'm going to skip mobile for now, and you'll see why in a minute. And so we'll leave that running. Now this part is very dependent on how fast your internet connection is. Because I don't live in a major city, I haven't done Safari Driver for a while, so do that. I don't have it, so excuse me while I type password. Right. And so it's all set up. In this case, we also give you some template tests. So you want to check that the title is correct on your page. It gives you what we think a login test should look like, how to run the examples, how to run a single example. And if you're interested, because we love the community, we have a Discord. You can come join our Discord. I highly recommend it because there's some really cool people in there, and you can come join the Discord and then you can do it. And so from going from nothing to this, we suddenly got a directory called Nightwatch. I will just make that bigger because I'm expecting people might be struggling. We've got Nightwatch, we've got our configuration, and then we've got our tests and node modules because it's JavaScript. So if I load up, because I use VS Code, here we are, there's that. We've got everything that we might need. So we've got some example tests, everything, page objects, how page objects could look. So in this case, the things that you might need, how you can kind of build up your page objects, and examples with page objects. So how you would write a test using homepage and how you could do things. And so from going from absolutely nothing to here is really key to what we want people to be able to like super quick get started writing tests, looking at tests, augmenting tests to move forward. And it's really, really important to us. So important that like we also realized that like the world has changed, especially after COVID, right? Webinars like this were far and few between. It was more kind of face-to-face things, and the web was always mostly desktop. The web has just moved. People are more on their mobile devices. You can see that in kind of different parts of the world where like things are becoming a bit cashless, because mobile devices, they can pay super quick through their mobile. And so if I create a for mobile, if I create a simple one, again, we'll so again, nothing. We do npm init Nightwatch latest. We'll get the same question. Again, for simplicity, I'm just going to pick end-to-end testing. But there are different things that we can do. I'm going to care about Firefox. Tests are going to be there. Localhost. We're going to run on localhost. Yes. Set up mobile devices as well. Yes, we do. So it's going to install the things that are installed earlier. So Nightwatch, set up the configuration basically, but then it's also installing Nightwatch Mobile Helper. So this is a tool that we created that kind of helps you set up your mobile test environment locally, but it doesn't need to be locally because like you're all champions. Sometimes it's better to set it up on real devices. And so in this case, it'll set up your Android SDK. Like in this case, I could use a real Android device, but I don't have one in my house. So I'm going to use an Android emulator. Android emulators are okay, but they're not always perfect. So there, it's I downloaded this earlier, so it's got the emulator ready for me. But now it's just making sure the emulator has everything I need. And so in this case, because it's an Android device, Chrome comes set up, but Firefox isn't. And so it's like, oh, it's noticing that Firefox is there. Get that done. So it's got Chrome, it's got everything, even sets up areas where you can run it, saves the state of the emulator. And now you can start running your tests on mobile devices in the same way. So in this case, like if I, just for simplicity, I'll just run that. It'll start up the emulator, start up Chrome driver, connect to Chrome on Android, run everything for me, run the tests. And so in this case, oh, there's a bug. I need to go look at that. But it's simple. And so now you can see that something is changed. It couldn't find what it needed to. So I'll need to go fix that test, but we've got a test. And so that's everything set up. Now, one of the things at the end that you saw, like on the, if I just do this, I'll just put it here, I'll cancel out of it, is that I can also do, no, we'll go, since there are a few people asking, is that I can also set up mobile app testing. And now I can suddenly use Appium as a backend, but now I have a simple API that is easy to use from Nightwatch that crosses both Selenium and into Appium, and you can drive everything that we can do. And so you can kind of do your mobile testing so that you can kind of drive how you want to do it. And so if you do this, there's a, like one of the examples is that it will, there's a like demo app that has been created for mobile from BrowserStack. It's kind of like a Wikipedia clone, and you can kind of start playing with it. But the main thing here is that you click everything that you, like if you're writing for web, you've already can write your same web test against a mobile device, but then you can start looking at how you can drive from there to Appium without having to kind of rework how all your tests are and do things like that. And so hopefully kind of that's like, that gives you the basics of how you can get into mobile testing, mobile app testing. But you can also do mobile web testing in a very simple way. Right. So I'm going to present. Right. And so got a quick poll, just because I'm very interested. I'm a big advocate for testing on everything that wherever your users are, but how many of you are testing your websites on mobile browsers right now? And if you're not, I'm curious, you could put it in the comments, why aren't you? And how can we maybe see about fixing that? I'll give it another minute before I kind of move on, in case there are other people who want to add. It's good to see more people testing on mobile browsers. I did a talk similar to this about a year ago, and the numbers were inverted. So it's good to see how things have improved. Cool. So I'll move on to the next. Cool. So we've seen how we can kind of very simply get a project up and running, but writing tests can be incredibly hard. So some people who come into the industry have kind of never had much experience in programming. I came in as a kind of process reengineering is what I did before I kind of went into automation. And process reengineering was about kind of seeing where humans could be automated, human tasks, repetitive tasks could be automated. And there's a huge overlap between that. And that's how I first came into the QA industry many, many years ago. But creating tests is very hard. Now, one of the things that Nightwatch has tried to do is try to simplify everything that we do as we move forward. So for web app testing only, we have an extension that allows you to kind of take recordings from Chrome and export them as a Nightwatch test. So you can kind of just like record how you see fit, export it as a Nightwatch test, and then move forward. Funny thing that happened once we released this feature, Christian Broman from the WebDriver.io project thought it was such a good idea that he went and copied everything we did. And so it's one of the nice things about open source is that like when there are good ideas, people copy them, and I'm all for it. So there's some good things that came out of it. We'll give a quick demo of that in a minute. But if you don't want to do that and you just like, you're like me, you like to write code, you can write your tests straight away. And so you can just kind of do simple tests. Nightwatch uses a Fluent API. And so for those who don't know what a Fluent API is, there's one that you can kind of do objects.function or method dot next method dot next method dot next method dot next method, and do that into kind of one whole line. And so you would get something like that. So in this case, the browser, navigate, wait for specific element to be visible, send keys to that element, click on that, and then you can kind of start doing, start doing asserts as you see fit. So what was the term? Fluent API, if that's what you meant, Garrett. So this is kind of like, you could push this all into one long line of ... It's kind of, there are other like Selenium and other frameworks that kind of do it, but the idea is just that you can do it. And so JavaScript is a big advocate. JavaScript frameworks are a lot of like it. So you can do wait, and like you could do like wait until, like each being a method, wait until it becomes visible. And you can do ... between each of the words, and that would become a Fluent API. And so you can do this. This is really simple. And when it, like the reporting, and I'll get to reporting later, is that you can see the code, like you can see each of the steps as it was happening. And because reporting is really important, like we all have to kind of report to management of at some point about how we're doing and what we're doing, we can show them quite easily. So earlier, and some of you have been asking the question already, which is why I've been kind of ignoring it, is like, when you, this is my next part, do you want your framework to be able to do only end-to-end tests, or do you want it to do more? And so would you like it to do component testing, API testing, visual regression testing, accessibility testing, unit testing, and so on? So this is the thing that I was hoping to see, is that like we can kind of see all the things moving to the side. So I know unit testing is a bit one of those ones that gets a bit funny, but like it's important, like having that single command to be able to run things. For me, and I say this as someone who's I think the best way to describe it is lazy, is that I want to be able to just memorize one thing and run that thing. So doing it quite easily. Awesome. So that's perfect. I don't need 9 answers is good enough for me. I don't need any more. But if you want to answer, do answer, because I'll come back and check them later. Right. So accessibility testing, right? It's the kind of one of the key things that is happening worldwide at the moment. There is EU legislation being enacted that kind of makes it really strict. There is US legislation around accessibility, that your website should be accessible. It's not always enforced, but like there's new laws that are coming into it. Accessibility is a first-class citizen in Nightwatch. So when you install Nightwatch, it will install the accessibility plugin, and you can create your tests to kind of make sure that they are accessible. Because while tools like Lighthouse and things like that will try to do some basic accessibility testing, they're not always the best. You always see kind of engineers who are trying to make the best scored websites out of 100, but it would have like, it's not accessible, it's not this, it's not that. And so we have accessibility testing. I'll show you an example. This gets installed when you do npm init. There should be an accessibility example for you to do. And so I've literally just copied it out of our examples that it's installed and put it here. Then there's API testing. That you can kind of create these tests. We kind of use super tests to do it. And so you can create your API test and tell it what to expect and do this. Now, to one of the questions that's already been asked is that, like, how do you go about running your tests against all these different things? The recommended way through Nightwatch to do that is to set up environments. And the reason why we kind of focus on this idea of an environment is that it could be is that you can kind of go into a CI and go, just run this command against this environment. And then it picks the relevant tests for that. And so like with we use super tests because it simplifies the API we could do. You could use, you don't need to use super test, but it has a much simpler API that people can follow, and it kind of follows into the night, and we can kind of it's got nice extension points that we can create these fluent APIs like the rest of Nightwatch, is that you can kind of do this, and then you can run your test, and then in a CI, you only want to be able to run one command and then get the results to see what's failed. You can see it quite clearly here in a reasonable way. But I'll go into more detail on this in a minute. And then there's component testing. It's kind of the kind of a buzzword that's going around. I'm a big advocate for component testing, and I'll show you, and I'm going to give a really good example of how component testing can like catch bugs better and faster. So what the image here is what I call the testing Christmas tree. I'm sure we've all been there at a company where there's tons of unit tests, you get smaller service tests, and then suddenly there's a ton of UI tests or end-to-end tests. And the higher you go up the pyramid, because this is a like bastardized version of the testing pyramid, the chances of flakiness creeping in, slowness creeping in, and things like that suddenly becomes really large. And it's important that we kind of focus in on getting the right type of testing and why it's important as we do it. And so component testing is this idea of kind of having a unit test, but in a UI test, so you can run things quicker and better. And so component tests are probably what a lot of like designers and front-end developers are potentially going to write, and then they might write one or two end-to-end tests. I'm a big advocate of trying to minimize the amount of UI tests where possible, or end-to-end tests, I should say, where possible. UI tests, you also have to be wary because it kind of becomes a bit crazy. And so, time for demo. I'm going to have a quick drink before I start my demo. Right. So here is an example of a, I'll just make the screen bigger. Let's get rid of that. Let's put this down. Of kind of a component. So we have a component. This is just a basic React component. And it's for a favorite button. So if I'm going to load it up. So bstackdemo.com. I'm sure you've seen this if you've had a look at the Test University work that Vel and Juhi and the others look after. And so each of these areas is a component. And so we're going to kind of show a test against a component. So kind of this block here in this case. And so we've taken the bstack demo app, we've made some changes. And so this is where I think for me, one of the areas that I think Nightwatch becomes really important. So a lot of people, front-end developers, will kind of run their tests against, like with Mocha or something like that. They'll use JS DOM in the background, or just pure jest, which is JS DOM. And then hope that kind of everything is working correctly. Now, Nightwatch's one other core philosophy after developer experience is being able to run your tests where your end users are. And I think this is really important. I did a talk at Selenium conference in April about how kind of browser engines is not a desktop browser, it's not a mobile browser. And if I show you a really simple example, right, we have, in this case, we have a spec test. So this is Nightwatch written into your spec tests. So you just create your test object. That's your browser from Nightwatch. So I'm just going to remove that. The pause is not needed, but I'll show you, like, it just allows you to see something. And here is the jest version of that test. So it's find the elements, click it, and then expect it to be clicked. So in this case, has to be clicked, right? I'm not putting a pause because it's not going to be anything visual. And so in this case, I run a jest test, runs, we have one pass. Don't worry about kind of the one pass. It's got all the like, it's just because we've only got the kind of expect like that. And it's the one test that has passed it. Nightwatch becomes a bit more verbose. And so from Nightwatch, if I do unit, in this case, we're going to run it against Chrome. We'll start up Chrome driver, run it against it. Very simple. And then tells you everything that it was expecting. Now, where Nightwatch becomes slightly better is if and I've copied this here, so I can literally just copy and paste, copy, paste. So now the icon, and so that's the little heart here, will not render on the page. Now, it's important that if people do want to be able to do that, they go, oh, yeah, that's cool. I need it. And so if I run my JS test, because I've made them, like, in this case, it's a deliberate, but like it could be lots of other things that could cause it. I run my tests. My test still says it's happy with things, which it shouldn't be. But if I run it with a real browser, in this case, and where it becomes really important, you'll notice, oh, it died too quickly. I can put the pause in the wrong place. The icon's missing, and then when you try to click on it, it says it's not interactable. The reason why it's not interactable is it's invisible, and so suddenly now you can kind of like do these super fast tests quicker with UI, without having to wait for kind of these slow moving end-to-end tests to do it. So it should be really simple. But in this case, this was just with React. If you're inside your company, you do things with Storybook. Let me, obviously it's me. So Storybook, if you do Storybook stories, you can write a test in the same way. And so you can do this. And this works for like Storybook, React, Svelte, and so on. We have each of them, unfortunately, just because of the nature of due to the nature of front-end frameworks, we have to have a different plugin for everything. And so if you go there, there's different plugins that we can do. So feeds, so on, Svelte, and so on. One of the other things that we also do from kind of that you can kind of do that works really well with component testing is visual regression testing. It's not as smart as something, say, like Percy, but it does basics. And so you can kind of run your tests against it, and just import it, and then just a basic search gets added that you can start doing things. So it's really cool that way. Cool. So back to presenting. Right. One of the other things that becomes really hard in the whole space, and I'm sure we've all had this, I've hated this, is when a test fails, being able to debug it. And so debugging becomes incredibly hard because you don't know why the problem exists, what it could be, things like that. So Nightwatch has an inspector that you can kind of like pause your test and then inspect what is happening on the page. Let's see. So if I go was omits demo, cool, and then Nightwatch, but we don't want Android. We want Chrome, debug. This is where I hope that everything works according to. Oh, I just spotted the one thing I forgot to mention. Oh, it's frozen. Always the case. Oh no, there we are. You can go into the Nightwatch inspect. Oh, I forgot to. Let's change that. It was there for a moment. Basic, yeah, and what we'll do is browse and put debug. We'll just do that. And you can go into the Nightwatch inspector. You can explore. It'll tell you all the different things, what the selectors are, things like that. And if you want to try Nightwatch commands, you can try them out right there. And you can change it to anything you want. So if you want find elements, so on, you can kind of do anything and then just see how that changes. And so you now, again, because developer experience is so key to how we drive everything, you can kind of just do whatever you want. And then when you get back to here, you can even type in those same commands here. So in this case, just copy and paste, because then I know it'll work. You could drive the browser from your command prompt moving forward. And then you can exit. And if you want to do kind of the other thing that can be kind of useful in this case is, say you're running your test, but you've got this like intermittent bug because something might happen and you just want to see what's happening as each of the commands is happening. There's a trace. And so what it does is it builds up I'll show you in a minute. It builds up what's happening on the page at the time. We've got our failure that I mentioned earlier. And then we can just go in to our reporter, and I will go into the report. So I've lost my browser. Where's my browser? Oh, there we go. You can see on the right here a screenshot of what happened as we were going through the page, what was changing. And you can kind of go, when I got to that point, it had night watches. And so, yeah, it's in, like, you can see the different reasons for why something has failed. And so that's really cool to be able to kind of debug things a little bit easier. And then, so this is the report that I kind of just showed you, like without the trace viewer, you can get reporting, you can see any of the key bits of information as it's happening. You can kind of, in this case, I did a component, we mounted a component. This was the favorite that I was doing earlier. Favorite that so that you can see key pieces as they're happening. It'll give you all the nice reporting. So like if you test it against something like mobile, for example, it'll say there was a mobile device, the operating system and everything. And you should be able to kind of get everything working. Reporting. And that's it. really. I think I've gone through everything. I've bound to have forgotten something, so apologies, but I know there's a few questions that I've missed, and I'll get to the questions. But if you want to try out Nightwatch, scan the QR code or just go to NightwatchJs.org. It has all the information that I've gone through on there today and kind of help you get started. And once you run the npm init, you should be able to also see the Discord, but there is a link on the website to the Discord that you can kind of start using that straight away and come join our community, get involved, answer some questions, ask some questions, because there's bound to be some good ones out there. And I think that's it. So yes, I will move to going to Q&A. So there was one Mr. Further. Okay. So one question. I'm not sure I understand that question. Move it to the next one. Does it support Flutter mobile app automation? I've not tried with Flutter, but the main thing is that if you can do something with Appium, you should be able to do it with Nightwatch when it comes to mobile. One of the things that we are looking to add to our roadmap in the near future is like, how do we approach mobile testing in a more dedicated way? So kind of with React Native, Appium is not always the best because you have to make changes around accessibility to make it more testable. So like Detox is improving in that space. How could we get better interactions with that? Same with Flutter. I've not done it, but the main thing is that if you can do it with Appium, then you should be okay. If not, then I'm always interested to hear your use case, and you can always reach out to me. The question, so one of the questions, I don't know if it's a question from Abane was, we do this framework design entirely JS or TypeScript. What will be a better choice to make a robust framework? If that's around how do you, the framework, like picking for your tests, it depends. And I think kind of, it depends on what your main goal is. If your main goal is about trying to catch type bugs quickly, then I would definitely go for TypeScript because then you can kind of catch those like potential typing issues. It's it's one of the key problems in like languages like Python, but which is now getting types, Ruby, JavaScript, and so on, is that you can kind of do that. But like the downside is that if there's something that happens during the compilation stage, and then your tests start failing, that can be an interesting thing to fix. And I know like frameworks like, I think it's not Ember, Svelte, are moving away from TypeScript because they find debugging with TypeScript too difficult. And so it's a balancing act. We're trying to support both as we go forward. So can you mix UI testing and API testing? Definitely. I would recommend you write it as two separate tests though, so that you can run them separately. The main reason is that like Selenium by design is you ask a page to load and then you interact with that page. But for a page to load, there could be tens of JavaScript files, tens of images, tens of everything like that. And so API testing in this case is that you're hitting that endpoint and getting a 200, but that page still might not load, for example, because there might be JavaScript errors, there might be everything else in there that kind of happens. And then the page, while it gives you a 200, might still give you a white blank page. And you see this a lot with front-end frameworks. Yes, you can do both. I'd recommend them in separate, like what we call environments in Nightwatch. And you have an environment for API testing. You write your API tests. They run that specific group of files. And then you run your UI tests or component tests separately.
I think Sachin has a question. Like, Sachin, please unmute and ask the question.
Hey, hi. Thank you, David, for the great session. It was really great. So I do have a question like about this Chrome diff tool. So Selenium 4, it provides support for Chrome diff tools.
Yes,
And so do we have, uh, can we also control those Selenium by this Nightwatch Chrome diff
definitely.
tools?
Definitely. So
Okay.
one of the key things that Nightwatch does is that we don't, like, unlike WebDriver IO, we don't want to look after the Selenium APIs. We want to care about how people go about testing their JavaScript and testing with JavaScript. And so what we do is we import, we have a dependency on Selenium WebDriver that the Selenium project manages, which kind of my team is managing through the work that we do with the Selenium project. And so everything that you expect from Selenium should work with Nightwatch. So the kind of the what we call like in the Selenium project, we call them BiDi APIs. So APIs that have bidirectional. So some people call them CDP because it uses CDP. In the future, it's not going to be using CDP. It's going to be using the WebDriver BiDi specified APIs, which are going to be far more robust than CDP, because between Chrome, like say 1.16 and 1.17, there could be underlying changes to CDP that breaks everything. And there is the Chromium projects have no interest in supporting that, but they have great interest in supporting BiDi. So as soon as we can move over to those APIs, you'll get more robust testing and things like that. Next week, Thursday and Friday, I'm going to be remoting into W3C meetings for those 2 days to discuss more BiDi stuff. And so that hopefully we can get some of the stuff out to you quicker.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thanks for the answer. So, David, so they like Selenium, they are, keep launching the latest version of Selenium 4. So in Nightwatch, are you also using the latest version, or like there is some time gap?
There's always
Like,
a bit of a time gap, mostly because it's around, we want to make sure that it's slightly more stable. And so like, but it's always only just like a couple of weeks. It's not anything major. And so like from a CDP point of view, it should be fine. But some of the things that become like that the Selenium project's working on, which I think is a fantastic project, is something called Selenium Manager, which sets up all your Chrome driver and your Gecko driver and everything for you from the Selenium project. But now it's also going to be setting up Chrome for testing and Firefox if you don't have those on your machine. It sets all that up for you on desktop, not on mobile. But Mobile Helper from Nightwatch can do the mobile stuff at the moment. You get all that stuff quite quickly. So we kind of just limit it. It's mostly because like we don't want an inadvertent update to Selenium breaking your tests if you're using Nightwatch. So we want to manage that update. But we try to keep it up as quick as possible. I think we're one version behind at the moment. It's like 4.11 through Nightwatch, and Selenium is 4.12. And I think they've done 3 patch releases, the Selenium project. So hopefully we'll be able to do the 4.12 very soon.
thank you, David. I got it. Thank you.
Seems like Abhinay has a question.
Yeah, so if we contribute to Nightwatch.js, which framework use Nightwatch? So at the moment, all our plugins are like we have a mixture. So we're trying to move the Nightwatch project over to TypeScript so that we can have a bit of like catch bugs a little bit quicker. We have some really good like BrowserStack champions who are in our Discord who kind of help us out with the TypeScript stuff, and they kind of like, oh, we've been doing this, and they help us with contributions. And so we're trying to balance it out that we can kind of get the key internals to TypeScript so that like we don't inadvertently send through the wrong type and break people's tests. So we get that extra layer of protection internally. But like some of our plugins are purely TypeScript. So like when you do something like npm init Nightwatch, that project is all in TypeScript. Some of our plugins for like I think React and Svelte are purely in TypeScript, mostly because there's key parts that we share between projects, and we want to make sure that the kind of API contracts are more solid and robust to handle that situation. Cool. Phil, have I missed any other questions?
I don't think so.
Awesome.